about denial. So I hope my thoughts will make sense. And I know that it's helpful for me to share, and I trust that it will be helpful for you to be here. So, I think a few things that I want to talk about. One of which was a glaring experience for me. Man, I'm nervous. I don't know why I'm so nervous. Sorry. Give me 1 second. It's only showing. There we go. Okay. It's only showing me, so that just makes it like extra awkward for me to just talk to myself. So now I'm talking to you. That's way more comfortable for me. So my most recent experience with denial happened a couple of years ago, and I got to this place where I was, someone was saying something to me all the time on a pretty regular basis, pointing out my defensiveness, and it was happening pretty regularly. And I got to a place where I was just like, man, I am so sick of hearing that. I need to do something about this. Like, I need to figure this out. What does this even mean? What do you mean I'm defensive? Why are you defending yourself? And all these, retorts that I just didn't have a clue how to deal with. And it really brought me to a place of recognizing that I really wanted something different in my life. And I know that there's a spot in the big book, and I tried to find it, but I couldn't find it. So I'm just going to go from memory. There was a spot in the big book where it talks about, it's in the beginning, I think it's in the doctor's opinion, where he's like, help me, like, I need your help. Like, I have a life that's really worth living, and like, I really just want to live it. And that's the place that I got in. I wasn't like at the rock bottom, desperate place of like, I have nothing left and please somebody save my life. But it was like, no, I feel like I have this like really amazing life, and yet this piece is so yucky and I don't want it anymore. And it's really been a process. The big book tells us to be fearless and thorough. And so that is the avenue that I went. I just decided, like, I want to be fearless and thorough. And I didn't know what that would look like, but I knew I wanted a couple of things. I knew that I wanted emotional sobriety. I knew that I wanted to feel emotionally sober. And I knew that I wanted close relationships, intimacy in my relationships. I knew that was a value that I really felt was important. And the problem with denial is actually that it's typically so thick that you don't even know that you're in it. I am not my best mirror whatsoever. And I have the joy of living with this wonderful mirror who we've both grown a lot. And so he doesn't try to be my higher power. But I also no longer rely on him to be my higher power. But there was a period of time where both of those things were happening, and we didn't necessarily see that it was happening. I didn't realize that I was looking at my husband to be my higher power. I didn't realize that I wanted him to be my answer. And I don't think he realized that he was trying to be my answer. I don't think he realized that that was happening either. That is through this process of humility and through a process of digging in and pursuing recovery, fearless and thorough, we both had our own realizations through this. So for me, I knew that I wanted emotional sobriety, and I had no idea how to get there. Everything that I had tried to do, all this knowledge that I had, all the time that I had spent around the rooms of recovery, all the years that I had spent in church and listening to sermons, it wasn't helping me get over whatever this was. And I just knew that I didn't want whatever this was. Like, whatever this defensiveness is, I don't want it. It's yucky and it's causing a problem in my home. And so prior to that moment, I was very unreceptive. I was fully in denial. I thought he was the problem. I thought he just needed to go mind his own business, or he could just be nicer, or, you know, all these things. Because, and then we just had like, there's a bunch of different forms of denial too. So I did want to go into that a little bit. We do that in LifeLab. We like to unpack what is denial? What actually is denial? And it's a form of self-protection. And I've spent my whole life trying to protect myself. How do I let God be God when I'm trying to protect myself? And so defensiveness, for some reason, isn't actually listed in the book, but it's for sure a form of denial and deflection, I guess. So there's simple denial, which it maintains that something is not so, which is indeed a fact, and it's obvious to like important, like the other people close to you are like, well, this is super obvious to me. I don't know why you can't see it. So there's also minimizing, which I was really excellent at minimizing. Oh, well, I work on Parliament Hill and I like have this great job, and look at me, I'm so successful in all these other areas of my life, and I have great friendships, and no one else tells me that I'm defensive. Like, I don't know what your problem is. Like, so I really minimized what my problem was. And I would say like, oh, well, I just have the occasional emotional outburst. Like, it's not such a big deal, or I'm able to manage in all these different ways. And so I was really, really good at minimizing. The actual definition of minimizing: admitting superficially to the problem, but will not admit that it is serious in scope. And I spent a lot of time in that area. And I think, I've heard it said like, the 98% of your life might be great, but like you've got this little 2% that you're holding on to. Well, it's the 2% that's going to kill us. And so when we minimize, that can be a huge destructive factor in our life. Blaming is another form of denial. It's also called projection, and it denies responsibility for certain behavior and points the blame on someone else or something else. And so if I'm blaming, I'll just use John as the example because it's the easiest, but if I'm blaming John for what's going on, I don't have to take any responsibility. I don't have to do anything different. The ball is in his court. And the really sad part about that, actually, that I came to realize is if I'm always blaming everyone else, there's no hope for me, right? Because I have no control over what other people do. And, if I'm in let's go back to when John was using, in active addiction. If I'm just going to blame John, like, oh, our life is terrible, this is so horrible because of all these choices that he's making and he's using and he can't stay sober, and I'm putting it all on him, there's no hope for me, right? I have zero control over what another person will choose to do or not do. I did not get John sober. There's actions that I took and that I believe God directed me to, that perhaps impacted the direction that our lives took, but by no means did I get John sober. And so the problem with putting it on someone else is there's no solution, there's no hope there. Rationalizing, there's just a couple more. So rationalizing, it makes excuses, it justifies, oh, well, but if only, if you had to walk in my shoes, you'd be like this too, those kinds of things. So that's where you're not actually like denying the behavior, but you're like making up excuses for the behavior. Well, you don't know what, like, if you had a hard life like I had, or you don't understand what was done to me. Like, if someone treated you like I've been treated my whole life, like, of course I'm emotional. Like, yeah, of course I can't trust. Like, why would I trust anybody? Like, I lived many years of my life from that perspective. Intellectualizing, it kind of takes that up to like a higher level where I, not just making excuses, but I have like these really well thought out, well expressed, probably, I've read a lot of books and I can really explain why these things are happening and theorize it. Diverting is a tactic that many people will use for denial. Just divert the attention to somewhere else, divert the attention to someone else. I don't actually want to talk about me. let's point our finger over here because there's a great big black hole over there. So I just want to divert attention over there. And hostility, which for sure I utilized hostility. I know you can't picture it, but sweet Vikki, she can blow. And I think I oftentimes held on to a big FU in my back pocket, and I would pull that out like when I wanted to, because I was a victim. I was the victim. And so I could be a certain way for a certain amount of time, but like, come at me, oh boy, I'm going to come back at you. And I want you to back off, and I want you to leave me alone because this is where I'm comfortable. And the trouble is there's no growth in those, right? There's no growth that's going to happen. We're going to go around and around and around on the same circle, which is just this hopeless spiral, this of relationship, a hopeless spiral of my own internal condition. And, I didn't even know what my own lies were. They were so deep, and I didn't know, even what my own coping mechanisms were. But the more time you spend in the rooms of recovery, you kind of start to see them, you start to learn them. When we start to really dig in, either through a process like LifeLab or the 12 steps, whether you're doing the steps through an AA group or an OA group or a Big Book Awakening group, however you're digging in, we're unpacking and we're revealing layers of denial and delusion. And, the lies that I was living under allowed me to just keep going the way that I was going and not have to make any changes. Lies, excuses, rationalization. And sometimes it's even interesting how other people can play into that too, because I remember people saying to me like, oh, you are so strong. You're so strong, and I think there was like this kind of like part of me that was like, yeah, I'm so strong. Like, look at me, patting myself on the back. Like, yeah, poof. Imagine if someone else had to live through what I lived through, you would have collapsed. Like, I came out a hero. Look at me. Like, my kids did great. My kids both graduated from high school. Imagine that. Thanks to me. But inside I felt awful. My insides didn't match my outsides, right? Like, maybe sometimes they did. Maybe sometimes my outside looked like a terrible train wreck. But for the most part, I thought, and I think a lot of people thought we had it all together, and even there was a point in time where really, we did have it together. We were pulling through. We were, we had come a long, long way, but there was still undone or unresolved addiction and unresolved healing that needed to happen inside in order for me to really get to the place that I really believe God wants each of us to be, to be in I've heard it said by one teacher. She'll talk about our false self, where we have this like false self that's protecting us. And God really wants to strip away our false self so that we can live an authentic life, in deep dependency and relationship with Him, and allow Him to heal us. So the questions the question is really, can I be honest? Am I willing to be honest? And who am I willing to be honest to? I don't think that I need to share everything with everyone, although that's a choice John and I make. I can't really think of anything we haven't shared with everyone. But that's not everyone's road. Everybody doesn't need to share their whole life with the world this way. But if I'm not willing to be honest with someone, another human being, am I really going to get to this next step? Am I going to be able to come out of these last layers of denial if I'm further along in the road of recovery. But if I'm early in recovery, you know, if this is brand new to me, when this was brand new to me, it was like first telling people what was happening in my life. It was so terrifying to tell people that like my husband was a drug addict and sometimes doesn't come home for 3 days. That was terrifying. What will people think? And so I needed safe people. And I wasn't a good judge of who is safe. I can't determine who's safe. So I began in the early years just seeing the denial, first understanding like, man, I've been living a lie. I don't want to live this lie anymore. Can I be honest? And the reality is, without honesty, I won't have transformation. I will stay trapped. Without tiptoeing into trust, I won't have breakthrough. You know, and trust is like this weird dance. You know, it's not like a plunge in head first, jump off the big diving board and like, now you trust. It's, you know, if I don't know how to trust, I tiptoe in, but I'm not reliant on the other person. I'm reliant on God. So I actually don't believe that the Bible is asking us to necessarily trust other people. The Bible is initially asking us to trust God. That's what God is asking us. And that's what God's asking us in this program. And as I learn to trust God, as I grow in my trust of God, I heard it described once as like, if I'm going to hire someone to like renovate my house, I'm not just going to hire them to come and like renovate my whole house. Probably if I don't know them and I couldn't get any good referrals, but maybe they're like the only person I can get a hold of, like maybe I'll have them renovate like my little spare bathroom first. You know, none of this is happening in my actual life, just to be clear. But as an example, maybe I would get them to do like this little bathroom and see what kind of job they do. And then maybe I would bring them in to overhaul my whole house. And that's what God asks us. He's like, give me some of your trust. Let's see where this goes. So we do this through working these steps, through working a program, through, you know, coming into a program like LifeLab. So the lies that are deep inside of me, am I willing to go to any lengths to get rid of them? Fearless and thorough. And really, you know, the big book tells us, the Bible tells us, like, until we are willing to let go, absolutely, we're going to stay stuck. We are going to stay, or we'll go round and round. The big book actually tells us, like, you can just like either reread this or throw it away. I don't think the Bible says that anywhere. It doesn't tell us to throw it away, but the big book actually really does tell us that. You know, like if you don't actually believe what we're saying, like reread this book or just throw it away. And I didn't want to just throw it away. You know, there was something about the very first room of Alcoholics Anonymous. It was an open meeting that I went to. And when I heard those people share, I knew that there was something in that program for me. I knew that the truths that they were sharing could heal something inside of me. And I knew that I wanted it. And so I thought I had to be an alcoholic. I actually became convinced that I was an alcoholic. And spent quite a bit of time trying to unpack that with some old timers, and they heard my stories and were really patient with me. And they were like, you are not an alcoholic. I was like, dang guys, come on, you know, but the reality is that's not the obsession that I had inside of me. That's not the physical allergy that I have is not to alcohol. Unbeknownst to me, the physical allergy that I have and the mental obsession that I have is actually more of, it's like an adrenaline addiction. It's like an emotional addiction. And so for me, I did not know. And I, you know, have lived my whole life going on this like emotional roller coaster. And when I get started, like it is a real like internal emotional allergy that I have no control over. Just like if I eat peanuts. So I can face my fears through this program, through committing myself to a group of people where I can be honest, or someone who I can be honest to, and with God. And I can face this because I'm not alone. And because the denial and the delusion that I was using to cover up and to, like, as my layer of self-protection, what I'm learning now is I don't actually need to protect myself. I am protected. I am protected. And as much as I want to learn and grow and be, a better person who doesn't do all those crazy things anymore, the reality is that I'm loved just the way that I am, that I'm actually loved and accepted by God exactly how I am. But he loves me so much that his heart for me is not that I would stay that way. His heart for me is that I would know freedom. And the freedom that some of us want, some of us want freedom from picking up a drink or picking up a drug. Some of us want freedom from clicking on the wrong, the things that we know we don't want to click on a computer screen. Some of us want freedom from, like, obsessive scrolling on our cell phones. But what we all want freedom from, every single one of us in this room, if you're here, I would say you want freedom from the bondage of self. Free me from the bondage of self. God, would you free me from that? That I would be able to live a life free from the bondage of self. So the hope for each one of us is that the problem and the solution are right inside of me, because God is with us. And he, my problem is not everybody outside of me. If I don't have to be my self-protection and protect myself from the world around me, then I don't have to be my solution. And God can be my solution. And so that is my experience with denial and the layers of denial that I have lived in for most of my life. And thank you so much for being here, and thanks for listening. I look forward to hearing your shares.